One of the most alarming and disappointing things to see is when feminists and women in general think that the marginalization and disenfranchisement of men doesn't affect them, or that it is something to celebrate. What these women don't seem to understand is that if men are struggling and are at the bottom, their hypergamy will ensure that they have no men to mate with. This fallacy seems to be perpetuated by the misconception that women don't need men anymore.
Like, I don't need a man to be happy.
This is from a segment in one of the episodes of the Whatever podcast, where Brian has his female guests watch a clip of a man explaining the problems facing men. Brian then asks the women what they thought about the struggles of men, and this is how some of them responded.
Honestly, I really don't give a rat's ass. If the male species is depleting, okay. You guys have had your time to shine. If you guys want to get better, you guys can do that yourselves, but I'm not going to get you out of the slump.
Although I can agree with her that men need to make an effort into making their own lives better, she still appears to be unaware of the consequences of having men struggle as a group, while their female counterparts succeed when she says this.
You guys have had your time to shine.
What she doesn't understand is that when men were doing better than women in education and finances, relationships could still happen and thrive. But when you have a scenario where women are doing better than men in the aforementioned aspects, mating and relationships do not happen. This is extremely important for women to think about because women get the most fulfillment out of relationships and having a family, and a family is something that can only occur as a consequence of a relationship. Another thing that we couldn't ignore from the words, "You guys have had your time to shine," is the undertone of resentment that men have been in charge of the world for the longest time. This resentment comes from, or is at least perpetuated by, yet another misconception that women were oppressed, and these women allude to this themselves later in the original video.
I mean, yeah, but you guys have had the upper hand for so many years that now...
Erroneous!
I mean, you have, we couldn't vote 100 years ago.
Women outpacing men in education and finances isn't something to be ignored or even celebrated, simply because it is responsible for a slew of societal problems which include low birth rates and loneliness in both men and women.
I don't need a man to be happy.
What young women need to be made aware of is the fact that it is easier to think that men and relationships aren't important when you have your college degree and career ahead of you. But when you acquire those things, you will soon realize that they don't make you as happy as having a family and children would. Women also need to learn from an early age that their need for men goes far beyond finances and reproduction. And this is because women are more socially oriented than they care to realize. What this also highlights is the problem of women being taught to prioritize and champion things that don't make them happy long term. As a society, we need to teach women the true essence of emotional intelligence so they can know that saying things like, "We don't care about men," will not do their relationships with men any good. You cannot claim to love people and simultaneously have no care for them. And while it might be good to point out that she was referring to men on a societal level, this particular mindset prevails even in individual relationships. Another thing that seemed to be prevalent is the attitude that men and relationships are superfluous, and this attitude is what hurts our society as it contributes to divorce.
I love men. I think men are the coolest, but I don't need them to survive.
The last thing I want to address is the disappointing act of women flaunting their academic achievements and yet are not smart enough to recognize that almost every one of their feminist belief is rooted in fallacy. Saying things like, "I don't need men to survive," while living in a society where pretty much everything was created, built, and is being maintained by men is outright stupid. It is also stupid to say that you don't need a man to get a job when most employers are male.
I don't need a man to get a job.
Feminists and young women alike need to also learn that the female's inability to vote and own property whilst married in the 1800s does not serve as proof that women were oppressed. They also need to accept that the measures and laws of the 1800s belong to a different time and were meant to combat issues of that time. Those laws are not for us to judge and fight over using standards of a completely different time. Anyways, this marks the end of my little rant. Take care.
If all men were to disappear, it would be chaos.